Hello, I'm Audrey McCool, and I'm part of the research group out of Texas Tech that's working to try to reduce cancer risk here in Muleshoe as part of the CPRIT-funded grant. I'm going to talk to you about whole grains as cancer-fighting foods as part 4 in this series that we're doing on the TV. Why whole grains? Whole grains are rather than refined grains, give you the total benefit of many natural plant compounds that can help reduce your risk of cancer. The USDA's My Plate, that I'm sure a lot of you have heard from, and the American Institute for Cancer Research's New American Plate say that 1/4 of the plate for any meal should be whole grains. And they've developed diagrams to show that grains are 1/4 of the plate. Harvard has identified specific things that should be as whole grains. It says eat whole grains like brown rice, whole wheat bread, and whole grain pasta, and limit refined grains like white rice and white bread, trying to give you a little bit more direction on what constitutes a whole grain. Whole grain means that all 3 parts of the grain kernel, the germ, the bran, and the endosperm, are included. Refined grains, on the other hand, usually have the bran and germ removed, leaving only the starchy endosperm. It makes it the white bread and the white flour that we're used to seeing. Whole grains are rich in fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals, which help protect the body cells from damage that may lead to cancer. And I put up a picture of a whole grain. You can see the bran is the outer covering. It's very high in insoluble fiber, which is important to the digestive tract, and a lot of B vitamins. The germ down at the bottom here, it has a lot of fat in it. And so that's one reason why it's removed, because it means that whole grain flours and so forth will spoil sooner. So we're left with the endosperm, which does have a fair amount of nutrient value and a lot of soluble fiber. But what we want today is to learn about whole grains and why whole grains in helping to reduce cancer risk. Whole grains do not contain a magical nutrient. We associate often whole grains with fiber. And certainly fiber is a very important component of whole grains and something that whole grains contribute to the diet. But that's not the magic bullet, if you will. So it's not just the fiber, it's the whole package. It's the elements in the whole grain that are interacting together and working together that are important. Just like any other plant foods, we don't really know what all the nutrients are in whole grains. And so we don't want to just separate out one. We want to think about the whole package, the whole grain. So what can they do for you? Whole grains are great sources of soluble fiber, which helps lower cholesterol. Also, insoluble fiber, as I mentioned in the bran, helps move waste through the digestive tract. Colon cancer, which is an increasing problem, often results from fecal matter being in the intestines for a long period, can contribute to the development of colon cancer. Fiber may kindle the body's natural anticoagulants, so doing help prevent the formation of small blood clots, heart attacks. Collection of antioxidants prevent LDL cholesterol from reacting with oxygen, helping to reduce the development of cholesterol-clogged arteries. So there's just some of the many things that whole grains can do for you to help improve your health and reduce your cancer risk. Some other things that are important from whole grains are phytoestrogens, or plant estrogens, that may protect against some cancers. There are also essential minerals in the grain, particularly magnesium, selenium, copper, and manganese, that are also important for helping to protect against cancers, as well as helping to reduce the risk for heart disease and diabetes. But as I said, we don't know everything. We're still trying to learn more about whole grains and how they may help you stay healthy. So what are whole grains? Usually people think about whole grains as wheat, but there are many whole grains besides wheat. And I've put a list of them up here, and I have a number of them here as samples. Everything from wheat kernels, barley, brown rice, and wild rice, rolled oats. Those are things that you're probably more familiar with. I also have flax seeds that are an important whole grain and readily available, as well as a sample of quinoa, which is a very old whole grain, originated out of Peru. It's unique in that it has a complete protein component. In other words, has all the essential amino acids contained in the quinoa, which normally you would otherwise only find in animal proteins. And then I have corn in the form of popcorn. And it's something that people don't often think about as being a whole grain. Now, the important thing, though, with popcorn is that you don't ruin the popcorn by putting heavy amounts of butter and salt on it, because we're also trying to keep fat and sodium down. So I suggest when you go buy popcorn, if you want to do the microwave version, which probably most of us do, look for things that are low in fat and low in salt, and they are available on the market like this one. So those are any number, and you say, well, can I get those? Yes, you can. Everything that I got here, and I live in Lubbock, so I didn't go shopping in Muleshoe because it was not as convenient to do. I got these, and actually mostly from the bulk bins in Market Street, and they're also in the 82nd Street, and so they're readily available. Things are a little cheaper, too, if you do decide to buy them from the bulk bins than in the prepackaged versions, and then you can buy exactly the amounts that you want. So how can I recognize then the whole grains on packaged products? Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, you should be looking for the whole grain symbol that's on the packages. And there are two versions of this symbol, as you can see here. The one with 100% that says 100% assures you that a food contains a full serving or more of whole grain in each labeled serving, and all the grain is whole grain. But the basic stamp, that is going to be a lot more common, that's this one here, appears on a lot of products containing at least half a serving of whole grains in the labeled servings. And then they also need to look at the amount. For example, this one says there's 23 grams of whole grain. This one says only 8 grams. This one's 16 and 47. And in fact, that's what happens on products. For example, I have the Kix product here that has the whole grain label on it, and it says that this has 13 grams or more of whole grains in this product. But I go to the other cereal that I've got here, Corn Chex, which also has the whole grain, and it only says 8 grams. And then I can also move to one that's 100% whole grains, and this one has 30 grams or more, but again still has the same label on it. So those are things that you can look for. The whole grain stamp that appears on a lot of products. Then you should also be checking the package label. There are often things on the label that indicates it's whole grain. For example, on the Kix product again, it says here in the circle 13 grams of whole grains. It's specifying what is here. And you'll find similar kinds of things on other products that are telling you how much whole grain is there. You should be very skeptical, though, if you see the words whole grain without more details, such as crackers made with whole grain. The question is how much whole grain? They can have as little as 1% in it. So it should be just a very minuscule amount that may be there if you don't read the label correctly. The other things that you should do is look at the ingredient list for whole grains or flour as the first listed ingredient. If the first ingredient contains the word whole, such as whole wheat or whole oats, it's likely, but not a guarantee again, that the product is predominantly whole grain. It still could have other refined grain products added. If there are 2 grain ingredients and only the second ingredient listed is a whole grain, the product may contain as little as 1% or as much as 49%. In other words, it could contain little or no, or maybe as much as half. And again, I have an example of this that I put up here, which is off this box, which lists the ingredients. The first ingredient is semolina wheat. Doesn't say anything about whole wheat, so it's a refined. Then it has durum wheat flour. Again, says nothing about whole wheat, it's refined. The third ingredient is whole durum wheat. So that's where the whole wheat is coming from. And this box also has the whole grain stamp on it, so it has at least a half a serving of whole grain in a serving, and it says it has 8 grams or more of whole grain in the product. So reading the labels and looking at the ingredient list becomes important. Here are some words that you might see on packages and what they mean. The first list up here, make this work, it's a whole grain and whatever the name of the grain is. It could be wheat, oats, corn, whatever. stone ground, brown rice, oats, oatmeal, wheat berries. All of those contain all parts of the grain, so you know you're getting the nutrients from the whole grain. This list over here is a little more shaky. Sweet, whole wheat flour, semolina, durum wheat, organic flour, stone ground. And one that confuses a lot of folks is multigrain. Multigrain merely means it's this mixture of several grains. It doesn't say anything about whether it's whole grains or refined. It can be either one. So maybe these words are accurate, but because some parts of the grain may be missing, you may or may not be getting a whole grain when those are the words labeling the package. These are definitely no's. If it says enriched flour, degerminated on cornmeal, bran, or wheat germ, it is not the whole grain. And you say, well, but bran is part of the whole grain. Yes, so it is, and so is wheat germ, and so is the endosperm, but it's not the whole grain. So I have some products here again to illustrate these. I have some bread, for example. I have just plain white bread. This would be made strictly from white flour. It has no whole grain whatsoever. This is whole grain white. There is a white wheat now, and that's a variety of wheat, which is a whole grain product. And so you see things made from white wheat, and it says whole grain. It is indeed whole grain, even though it appears to be white. And this is 100% whole wheat. So again, that's all whole wheat. And people say, is this it's too expensive to buy whole grains? Well, per slice, there is a 3-cent difference between the white and the whole grain. So at 3 cents, let's see, there's 20-some slices, let's say there's 20 slices in a loaf, that I could eat a whole loaf and spend an extra 60 cents to get whole grains, and I could save a lot in my health care by doing so. So that's one example. Then I have several corn products here. I have two different forms of grits. This is grits with nothing but whole grain. 10 cents a portion. And we had a program that some of you may have seen before where we talked about the Nuval scores that are in United. It says a Nuval score of 82. It's a very high score. I take those same grits and put them in a box, package it, processed, and I'm paying for packaging and what have you. And importantly, in the food label, the word on the ingredients is specially processed, degerminated white corn grits. And if you don't remember, the degerminated is a word that tells you this is not whole grain. These are not whole grain grits. These are. Cost goes way up. I'm paying a lot for packaging. My Nuval score goes way down. It's not a whole grain, doesn't have the nutrient value. And the same with the kicks in the corn checks again. They are whole grain products, but do have a mixture of whole grains and refined grains. And then as my last example, I put up some pasta. Unfortunately, I couldn't find all the same brands. I have a whole grain pasta, a white wheat pasta, and an enriched flour pasta. And as you can see, again, thinking about the Nuval scores that we talked about in the other video, the Nuval scores range from 91 for the whole grains and 87 for the white wheat whole grain, almost the same. And you get to the enriched flour, and it's just 57. So there is a lot of difference in the products, and you can identify that by looking at labels and looking for these words. Some people, again, think about fiber and whole wheat. So one final thought, fiber content in a package is not a reliable indicator of whole wheat or whole grain. Fiber varies from grain to grain, 3.5% in rice, over 15% in barley. So high fiber products sometimes contain bran or other added fiber without having much of the whole grain. So while both fiber and whole grains are important for health benefits, they're not interchangeable. So don't just look for fiber, look for whole grains in when you're looking for labels. And again, I put this example up here. This one is whole wheat. It's an excellent source of fiber. But if I read the ingredient label, this has bran added to the product, increasing the fiber content. So in summary, whole grains are packages of many nutrients. We want to get as many of them as we can. Eating whole grains has been shown pretty consistently to reduce the risk for chronic diseases, including cancer. If you look at the package labels carefully, you'll see the whole grain content. Don't just look for fiber. Look for the whole grain stamp. And above all, read the ingredient labels and compare the products. Know what you're buying and know the health value for what you are buying. Thank you.